But this is a clear sign that they're not selling the types of tickets that they wanted to be selling, that Prince Harry doesn't attract the audience that they assumed he was going to attract.
Is Meghan Markle's team practicing their PR Pilates again? Me think so.
He's out here trying to lock in a wild $1 million fee for every single speech, and that number alone already raises eyebrows. Now check the reality in Melbourne this week. Tickets are barely moving, and despite all the noise and promotion, the room is still looking half empty. So what's actually happening behind the scenes? Harry is in Australia right now, part of what his team is branding as a huge speaking tour, with the main event being a workplace mental health summit in Melbourne.
But his ailing father, who has cancer, it's just rubbing it in their faces as they continue to pursue what they were instructed not to. And, I really sympathize with the royal family here because it feels like they've lost complete control.
On paper, it sounds polished. Big venue, 2-day schedule, industry crowd. But when you look closer, the numbers tell a completely different story. Ticket prices didn't just dip a little, they straight up crashed. Starting at $2,400, then cut to $2,000, then dropped again to $1,000, and now sitting at just $500 for online access. That's 4 major price cuts for one event built around one speaker, and behind all of it is one number that keeps popping up, $1 million. That's the...
Meghan Markle, she's over there not even doing solo shots. She's like, I'll do a group picture. They paid $3,200 and y'all are going to get one group shot.
Figure Harry was reportedly aiming for per speech when he first entered this space, and that number was everywhere back then, never clearly shut down either. Now compare that to Melbourne, where reports suggest he's pulling in closer to $50,000. From $1 million down to $50,000, and still struggling to fill seats. That's not some clever pivot, that's a huge drop. We're talking nearly a 95% fall in just a few years. And even after slashing prices again and again, the crowd still isn't showing up like expected. Kinsey Schofield said it straight this week. Harry is not pulling the audience his team thought he would. That's not guesswork, that's backed up by the ticket sales themselves. And this didn't just start now. The earlier event in Washington already hinted at trouble. Seats were going for $1,800. Expectations were high, but people who attended came out confused.
Well. You have got to give it to Meghan. She's not anything if persistent because she's managed to infiltrate the Mexican community to start spreading news in her favor in order to discredit us.
One summary even said, "What the heck? No deep research, no clear solutions, no solid data. Just personal opinions being delivered to a paying crowd. People paid top dollar and expected something serious in return. But Melbourne is showing the same pattern all over again. This isn't bad timing or just a one-off moment. It's starting to look like a trend you can't ignore. The original plan was clear. Position Harry as a high-value speaker, someone standing shoulder to shoulder with global leaders and respected experts. But that kind of price tag comes with pressure. It demands authority, real insight, and something unique people can't get anywhere else. Now the big question is impossible to dodge. Does the content actually match the cost?
Harry and Meghan cannot leave the royal roles behind. This is an absolute cosplay royal tour, and the red flags are there. King Charles, Harry and Meghan are going to do whatever they can to undermine the monarchy, and he is allowing them to.
This was a man that upon leaving the British royal family was demanding $1 million per speech. And now it's like, no, that's not going to happen for you. Not when we've seen what you're capable of saying, and it's not much.
Washington already raised eyebrows, but Melbourne is turning up the volume, and this is where things start slipping apart. Every event seems to follow the same script. Harry walks in, steps on stage, and ends up talking mostly about himself. But the audience isn't there for that. They're expecting real knowledge, useful takeaways, something they can actually apply. Instead, what they're getting feels more like a personal story than a professional breakdown. And every time this plays out, the next deal comes in lower than the last. From $1 million all the way down to $50,000. That's not a small adjustment, that's a steep fall. 4 rounds of price cuts, and still empty seats in the room. That's not a temporary dip, that's a direction, and it's moving one way fast. call it the $1 million gap, the massive difference between what was once expected and what's actually being paid now. A 95% drop in just a few years is huge, but here's where it gets even more interesting. Even at $50,000, tickets still struggled to sell across every price tier. That suggests the real demand could be even lower than what's being negotiated behind closed doors.
Meghan Markle hasn't been able to sell 300 tickets.
Prince Harry is now being seen as a poster boy to give mental health expertise. He is not a mental health expert, someone that speaks brazenly about drug taking in their memoir is not an expert in mental health whatsoever.
And then there's the part that really makes people pause. The same person speaking about workplace mental health is also linked to reports claiming around 25 employees have left his organisation since 2020. That's not a small number. It raises real questions. Staff departures, falling speaking fees, and venues that still aren't filling up. All while the topic on stage is workplace well-being. That contrast is hard to ignore, and people are starting to ask real questions. Who is this message actually for? Now look back at what many are calling the DC precedent. Tickets were sitting at $1,800 per seat. Expectations were sky high, but the reactions told a different story.
From a man who can't keep an employee to save his life, talking about workplace mental health. So originally it was a 2-day summit that was priced like, I want to say close to $2,400. There was another tier that was $2,000, but now they've added an additional tier out of desperation for $1,000 to physically be there. But if you'd like to stream it online, you can do that for about $500. But this is a clear sign that they're not selling the types of tickets that they wanted to be selling.
People walked in expecting depth and walked out confused. As one summary put it, what the heck? No detailed research, no structured solutions, just personal viewpoints shared with a room full of paying attendees. And here's the key detail. None of this came out of nowhere. Every appearance has followed the same pattern. No deep studies, no strong data-driven breakdowns, just a heavy focus on personal experience. Again and again. So now the question gets louder. If people are paying for expertise but getting something else, what are organisers really selling when they book these events? But there's another layer that makes this even more interesting. While one side is speaking to rooms that aren't fully packed, reports say Meghan is preparing to open a private members club location in Australia, linked to Soho House, an invite-only, application-based network. The contrast jumps out immediately. They stepped away from one of the most recognised and structured institutions in the world, only to now be tied to another type of exclusive circle. Different setting, same idea of exclusivity, just in a new form.
But to spend thousands of dollars to go hear Meghan Markle talk about business advice or how to live your best life, she can't even run her own businesses, okay? The jams, jellies, and dog biscuits and all the as-ever stuff, it's horrible. It's barely selling. We haven't seen new products in months. The Netflix deal, down the tubes. So I don't understand who's paying to get business advice from Meghan Markle.
From global stages to private clubs, the shift is clear, and people are watching closely. And this is where things take a sharper turn. It's no longer just about ticket prices or half-filled venues. It's about perception. The image that was once being built doesn't fully line up with what people are seeing now. There was a time when the pitch was simple, a high-value speaker, positioned alongside global leaders, delivering insight you couldn't get anywhere else. That was the expectation. But now the reaction is shifting, and it's getting louder every single time. Event after event, the same feedback keeps popping up. People walk in expecting depth, structure, and real guidance, then walk out wondering what they just listened to.
Harry's being paid $50,000 for this, $50,000 for this speech. And as you say, they can't sell the tickets. So they're slashing the prices, As far as we know, the place is still half empty. So they're desperately trying to virtually give the tickets away to spare Harry the embarrassment of having to speak to a half empty auditorium.
That gap between expectation and reality is starting to stand out in a big way. Some reactions are blunt too. Attendees have reportedly said things like, That wasn't what I expected. And even, where was the actual advice? Those kinds of comments don't just disappear, they stick and they spread fast. And here's the uncomfortable truth about the speaking world. Reputation moves faster than any marketing campaign. One week event can be brushed off, sure. But when it turns into a pattern, it gets harder and harder to ignore. Organisers start paying attention. Audiences start hesitating. Ticket buyers stop rushing and begin waiting it out. That urgency that once drove high prices, it slowly fades away, piece by piece.
Prince Harry doesn't attract the audience that they assumed he was going to attract.
Everywhere they go, they spread additional misery. And because the brand itself, the brand identity of Harry and Meghan is so incredibly bad that toxicity just gets spread everywhere they touch.
Then comes the bigger issue, credibility. When someone is presented as an authority, the expectation is simple. Bring real value, something practical, something people can actually use. Without that, the whole setup starts to crack. And right now, that crack is getting wider. Bookings might still be happening. Events might still get scheduled.
The reaction from the audience was like, what the heck? I think it was $1,800 for those tickets to sit and listen to a privileged man complain about his upbringing in a castle.
He's trying to flog tickets to something so boring it hurts and nobody wants to go. Meanwhile, she's selling selfies at a hotel in Sydney for about $3,000 a pop. It's embarrassing how far these two have fallen, isn't it?
But the energy feels different now. There's less buzz, more skepticism, less demand, more hesitation. This isn't just about one speech or one city anymore. It's about momentum. Is it building forward or quietly slipping away? And if this pattern keeps going, the next phase might not just be about lower fees or smaller crowds. It could turn into something bigger, whether the stage itself starts to fade out, and that question is getting harder to ignore. So now the question hits harder than ever. Was this really the upgrade they were aiming for, or just what was left after everything else fell apart? Look at this comparison because it speaks loud on its own. Catherine, Princess of Wales, built her early years project on actual research. Data was collected, studies were published, and the findings were shared openly for people to see and use. When she speaks, there's structure, there's purpose, and there's something real the audience can take away. She doesn't make it about herself. The work speaks for itself, and that difference is hard to miss.
But for Harry and Meghan, it's not working, and it hasn't worked. It's not working. It hasn't worked for ages. And they keep trying the same things again and again, thinking that will right the ship.
I mean, they think there's going to be so many people there. They'd need to set up railings. They'd need crowd control. Absolutely not. The few people that might turn up to see Harry and Meghan, I don't think are really going to have nice things to say about them. But that's all it's going to be, a boo here and there.
Now stack that up against Melbourne, a reported $50,000 appearance, multiple ticket price cuts, and still a venue that isn't filled. No research announced ahead of time, no preview of data, no clear framework shared before stepping on stage. That gap shows up immediately. One side builds solid content, the other leans on appearances, and the market is reacting to that difference in real time. But here's where it gets even more telling. There's been no clear response to any of this, no real explanation for the repeated ticket price drops, no detailed preview of what's actually being delivered to justify the cost, and no direct pushback against the criticism. Just silence, and that silence stands out. This is the same team that has responded quickly in the past when pressure hit. Statements used to come fast, responses were sharp, and narratives were challenged almost instantly. But now, when it comes to pricing, attendance, and audience reactions,
Harry got on stage in DC and moaned and groaned about how he's lacked privacy since he was born, offered no solutions. It was just another mental breakdown for an audience to witness. And a lot of the people in DC were disappointed that they'd paid such a significant, I think it was $1,800 for those tickets.
nothing. And at this point, that silence starts to say a lot more than words ever could. The original message was bold. The idea was to step out, do more, reach further, and create a bigger impact. That was the promise. Now fast forward to where things stand. A venue that isn't full, no clearly defined expertise presented up front, and ticket prices that have been cut again and again from $1 million expectations down to just a fraction of that. The platform is still there, but the value tied to it is being questioned more than ever right now. And while all of this is playing out, there are reports of separate appearances and exclusive experiences happening elsewhere, adding another twist to the story.
Because all you bring is bad luck, all you bring is nastiness, all you bring is toxicity wherever you go.
So my advice to all the women, take the money and invest it. Okay, take the money and enjoy being at home. Don't pay thousands of dollars to go sit under this cheap fluorescent lighting and listen to Meghan Markle talk like she's a female founder. The only thing she found was a rich, famous husband.
Same name, same level of visibility, but the public reaction feels completely different. What started as massive expectations is now turning into uncertain outcomes, and people are paying close attention. The shift is obvious, and this trip isn't even over yet. Whatever happens when the next audience walks in, no matter how big or small, it won't stay quiet for long. And just when it to vow like things couldn't get more intense, they do. Because now the focus moves to what actually happens inside the room. Not the headlines, not the pricing, not the outside noise, but the real moment when the speaker steps up and delivers. That's where everything gets decided. All the promotion, all the branding, all the build-up. It comes down to one simple question. What does the audience actually experience? And this is where the pressure really hits. People aren't showing up casually anymore. They're walking in with questions, doubts, and expectations shaped by everything they've already heard.
Bob Shooter had told me that Meghan was going to be quietly, she's going to wait to the last minute to announce it, but quietly will be also opening a Soho house over there. And the Daily Mail over the last few days has reported the same thing.
Some are curious, some are skeptical, and some are just waiting to see if this is finally the moment things turn around, because this really is a turning point. If the content hits, if the message connects, if something real and useful is delivered, then the whole narrative can flip fast. One strong performance can shift perception, rebuild interest, and bring momentum right back. But if the same pattern shows up again, that's a different story. If people walk out feeling like they didn't get what they paid for, that reaction won't stay inside those walls. It spreads fast. And in today's world, that kind of feedback moves instantly. One comment turns into 10, 10 turns before you know it. The entire story is shaped by those reactions. That's the real risk right now. This isn't about potential anymore. It's about proof.
It's a private elite club that you have to submit a request to join. You have to pay monthly to leave the ultimate, elite in the British royal family to go cut ribbons at a Soho house. I'm sorry, but what a fall from grace.
Not what could happen, but what actually happens when it matters most, and the stakes are higher than ever. Every word, every point, every second on that stage is being watched, judged, and remembered. Because this isn't just another speaking event. This is a test of value, a test of credibility, and a test of whether people still believe there's something worth showing up for. And once that moment is gone, that's it. No edits, no rewrites, no second version.
I think a great example of that is Catherine's early years project. Occasionally they'll release the research that she's generated through that project.
What happens on that stage becomes the story, and it sticks. But it doesn't stop there. What really matters is what happens after the event, because that's where the real impact shows up. Not the promotions, not the pricing, not even the headlines. It's the reaction that follows, the conversations people have while walking out, the posts that start going live, the messages being sent between attendees. That's where the truth starts coming out. Because people talk, they compare notes, they share opinions, and they don't hold back when something doesn't meet expectations. If the experience feels worth it, that energy spreads fast. But if it doesn't, it spreads even faster. And right now, that risk is sitting front and center.
People catching on and realizing that maybe he's not an authority on all of these things. And do we really want to spend such a significant amount of money to listen to a grown man cry?
This isn't happening in isolation either. Each event builds on the last. Each reaction adds another layer, and over time those layers turn into a reputation that's hard to shake.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's return down under could not be going more disastrously for them. It is an epic train wreck so far, and they haven't even left the North American continent.
That's how momentum really works. It either builds up strong or it breaks apart fast. And here's the key detail in this space. Value isn't decided by titles or past recognition. It's decided by the audience in real time. They're the ones who decide if something is actually worth it, if it delivers, and if it's worth recommending to others. No audience, no momentum, no strong reaction, no demand. It's that simple, and it's that direct. So now all eyes are locked on what happens next.
To leave the ultimate, elite in the British royal family to go cut ribbons at a Soho house, I'm sorry, but what a fall from grace.
Will the reaction flip the narrative? Will people walk out saying it exceeded expectations? Or will the same doubts keep showing up again and again? Because at this stage, it's not about promises anymore. It's about outcomes. And outcomes decide that everything moves in. Right now, that direction is still being shaped live, with every event adding another piece to the bigger picture. And if the reaction doesn't shift soon, this won't just stay about one tour or one appearance. It could start redefining the entire path forward.
She's never supported women. When the Queen was on her deathbed, what was she doing? She was doing Oprah interviews. She was doing Oprah interviews accusing her in-laws of racism and saying that they drove her to be miserable and drove her to be depressed. And this is called the Her Best Life Retreat.
That's how fast things can turn when the audience makes the final call. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think is really going on here? If this breakdown made you see things differently, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to see it. Stay tuned for more deep dives like this because it's only getting more intense from here.